Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960 AM News Talk Radio. I want to bring you interviews, as I've done in the past, with some interesting companies that have really sort of reinvented themselves in this time of COVID-19. We've talked to a transportation company that's launched drones. We've talked to a DNA testing company that's launched DNA tests. We've talked to a toy manufacturer that's manufacturing masks. And tonight we're going to talk to Jim Ashton. He's the president at Imagine Fiberglass Products based in Kitchener. They normally manufacture fiber-reinforced plastic products, but these days they've added something new to their inventory. What they've done is an economical, friendly answer to disposable PPEs for our COVID-19 situation. So Jim, how are you? Welcome to the Brian Crombie Show.
Hey, thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me. We've developed a booth for testing, and we've based that booth on booths that we've seen used in the market, in particular South Korea, where as National Geographic had identified it as one of the pillars of the South Korean response, which they've been very successful in their ability to really keep the COVID-19 at bay, and a good part of that was done through testing. And so we saw that opportunity to take a engineering control in a fixed booth and give the care provider the ability to not have to don and doff PPE for each individual COVID-19 test that's administered. And
so is this outside or inside a hospital, or in one of those sort of triage tents we see in front of hospitals, or what?
This could be placed in any situation, really. It could be in a tent. It could be inside a clinic or hospital setting. It's very portable and lightweight, what we've made, and quite easy to move around, weighing only about 35 kilograms. Two people can easily move it around. It fits through a standard commercial door. So you could do outdoor testing like you've seen at the tent situation, or you could do indoor testing in a clinic or a hospital, depending on the need.
And how'd you come up with the idea, and how quickly have you been able to ramp up?
Somebody pointed out to me the work that had been done at Brigham and Women's Hospital at Harvard, where they had developed a booth similar to on the basis of the South Korean design. We saw they were making it out of polycarbonate panels that were assembled together with aluminum strip, and decided that we could make it lighter and quicker and cheaper by using fiber reinforced plastic. So we mold a three-sided booth, cut in with CNC 3 polycarbonate panels. The front panel has glove ports that allow the care provider to access a patient with shoulder-length gloves that you can administer a nasopharyngeal swab with either a patient in a seated position or standing, with the patient perpendicular to the booth and the non-dominant hand of the care provider behind the neck of the patient, and you can insert the nasal swab and administer the COVID-19 test that way. So we just felt we could make a booth that could ship and be deployed quickly, would be economical, and just easier for care providers to implement.
Excellent. Well, I congratulate you for doing so. How quickly have you been able to ramp up manufacturing?
We started the project at the 1st of April. Within a week, we had our first prototype, and now we've been marketing it to various clinical situations, hospitals, different people. We certainly tried taking the avenue of the provincial procurement portals, the federal procurement portal, and so on. So we're in a marketing phase at this point.
Have those been helpful, those portals?
The portals are good. The difficulty with the portal, when it comes to something like we're offering, we're eliminating the need for gloves, gown, mask, face shield, goggles, all of which are checkboxes on the portals, but of course ours checks all the boxes but none of the boxes. So it's the square peg round hole, or round peg square hole, and so I think it's been a bit of a challenge. They're there doesn't seem to be a specific observation of a solution like this in the portal. So I think it's a challenge for the government to so rapidly try to roll out a procurement program and not necessarily be able to accommodate innovative solutions.
Well, the problems with bureaucracy sometimes is that you do have to tick a box. And so we're gonna have to keep on trying to find that right box for you.
Yeah, exactly.
So you are in the marketing stage. And obviously, is this something that you're marketing primarily in Canada or worldwide?
We've certainly done marketing in North America at this time. We've been in contact with the folks at Brigham and Women's Hospital to get feedback on how their booths were implemented and what worked and what didn't, as well. Massachusetts General Hospital, which is also Harvard affiliated, Dr. Chris Olson there had some excellent tips as to how to improve the ergonomics of the booth and whatnot. So we've reached out to a number of hospitals and the state portals in the US, as well as the provincial and federal portals here in Canada with respect to procurement. And we've reached out to a number of hospitals and care providers directly.
We're chatting with Jim Ashton tonight. He's the president of Imagine Fiberglass Products, about the booths that he has designed and is marketing for replacement of PEE for COVID-19. We're going to take a quick break for messages. Stay with us, and we're going to come back more with Jim on how he's gone about this process. Stay with us. Well, welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're chatting with a gentleman who runs a fiberglass plant in Kitchener, and what he's done is he's invented a prototype that he's out marketing right now for a booth that really replaces a lot of the personal protective equipment, the PPE, that has been this big complaint that we've been hearing on the news night, overnight, that there's not enough of. And he replaces all this need for all this disposable PPE with a actual unit that people can use. Jim, you said you might be able to show it to me. Can you show it to me?
I can, yeah. Let me. I'm going to back up the computer here and push it out, and I'll actually try to adjust a little and go inside. And
is that it right there?
I'm sorry?
That's it right there.
That's it right there. So this is a one-piece fiberglass booth, three-sided. We can add a positive pressure option to it by skirting in the back, so that we can have a completely PPE-free experience for the provider, or in a clinic where you're doing multiple tests in rapid succession. That's a nice, comfortable environment for the provider. In a clinic where you're not doing quite as many tests, then you can do just the three-sided booth without the positive pressure, and still eliminate the change between tests. So if you follow the Health Canada or the CDC protocol for testing, then you would be required to eliminate gloves, gown, mask, goggles, and face shield after each test, or clean the same. So each test, you're using about 65 grams of PPE. So when we think about the millions of tests that are going to be done, I mean, they're talking about 500,000 tests a week in Canada, and about 5 million tests a week in the US. And so if we talk about the 65 grams per test of the PPE that's supposed to be changed on each test, 1 million tests is about 140,000 pounds of PPE that's discarded. So obviously, if you do 5.5 million tests in a week, that's best part of 750,000 pounds of biomedical waste.
So this is a lot less. This is a lot less waste.
A lot less waste. But the other thing that you have to mention, and you've already identified, every night on the news, we see that there's shortage of PPE, and the shortage is going to become even more difficult as we resume elective surgeries and everybody else goes back to work. Right now, if you try to phone as a business to get nitrile gloves, for example, they're back ordered until October, November, December. So if we can, look at the cost side of it, PPE has risen in price by as much as 5 times. A booth like this would pay for itself doing 100 tests in a day, in just a day. So the cost
In just
of
a
a booth,
day. Payback
you
is
literally
just a day.
pay, yeah. So worst case, if we were in pre-COVID-19 price model, then you would pay for the booth in 8 to 10 days. In current model, based on government showing up at factories with suitcases full of cash to scoop the order from their competing bidder, the prices have been driven up that much that, depending on what situation you're in. So if you've got a good, reliable government contract, then the prices have gone up substantially. But in any event, in under 10 days, this booth pays for itself.
And that doesn't even include any labor saving. I've seen videos, you've probably seen them too, of healthcare professionals putting on their PPE. It's like there's a lot of stuff. It takes them a couple of.
And this is maybe part of the problem in it being adopted. I mean, with the healthcare providers that I've talked to a number of different hospitals, different circumstances. The way that people are doing tests is not necessarily the same, or they're not necessarily following the infection control protocols that they should be following. So there are cases where they're not necessarily changing the gown, they're not necessarily changing the mask, etc. on a per. But yeah, you're right. If you do the full protocol and follow the infection control procedures that are prescribed by Health Canada and the CDC, then yeah, you've got a huge amount of waste, and you've got a time savings significantly. So with this booth, you clean the shield, the sneeze shield, basically. You'd clean the space where the patient's face has close proximity, and you'd clean the gloves. The other option, as Dr. Olson at Harvard had suggested, is that for speed in a rapid testing environment, they do use an overglove. So they're not necessarily trying to thoroughly clean this attached glove, but they're trying to overglove. So even the gloves are 5 grams, so you're still potentially saving 60 grams, but you're still providing a safer environment. You're still providing significant cost savings. So whether we use the full amount of PPE on a per test basis or not, there's still going to be time savings. There's going to be a comfort factor. There's going to be less waste. There's going to be more PPE available for whether it be elective surgeries or industry that's going to need PPE. So, there's a lot of benefit to it. It's more a question of finding the political will, I think, at this time, to acknowledge that we need to look at some environmental and some economical solutions, not just ticking the box.
Well, and I've got to believe it would also be better from a labor standpoint. Now, I wonder about that. Can the patient actually get close to it? Any chance you could go behind it and put your hands in the
you can. I'm close enough here now that I'll just show you the glove in front of my face. But I'm in a seated position, and the glove would be easily, at my. So the glove, the provider would be non-dominant hand behind your head if you're in a seated position, and using their dominant hand for the nasopharyngeal swab. So this is a seated position, and you're not going to be able to see me, but I'm standing obviously perpendicular to the booth. You can't quite see me there, sorry. And so in a seated or standing position, and I'll just go behind it and put my hands in the glove port.
It's sort of the size of a telephone booth, and or those old telephone booths that you remember, or an ATM machine or something like that. And you're with the plexiglass glass. I've got to believe it's actually a lot more comfortable for the healthcare worker that's in behind the fiberglass.
It's the most comfortable position that was found. So the people at Mass General used, according to Dr. Olson, had used a 3-sided booth initially, which the providers found very comfortable, but they found it more comfortable when they added the positive pressure option. So by adding a little bit of pressurized air to the booth by closing it in on 4 sides, then they have no mask, no face shield, and it's very comfortable. And certainly from a it also, from a safety point of view, it's safer because it's an engineered control. You have a fixed barrier between you and the patient. So, on the hierarchy of controls, PPE, which can be faulty or put on improperly, this gives you a far more reliable, secure place for testing.
Well, and I've seen so many pictures of healthcare workers using the gloves to scratch their face or to itch their nose or whatever it is that we do, some 100 times or 1,000 times a day naturally. And so whatever's on their gloves, they're getting onto their face, close to their eyes, close to their mouth, close to their nose, and still getting infected. And the number of healthcare workers that have been infected, even wearing PPE, would suggest that certainly is a problem. And yours,
well, yeah,
the way you can touch your face.
And this is some of what I started to say earlier, is that each of the clinics, hospitals, different infection control procedures or accepted practices across different healthcare organizations. And so, I've heard everything from the physician isn't wearing gloves to administer the test because he feels that it's simpler and safer, as safe to just wash his hands between patients, to the fact that sometimes they're changing the gown, sometimes not. From an infection control point of view, this would be more reliable, or presumably more reliable. At least this is what I'm understanding from the Harvard people, that it gives them better control over infection control for the provider specifically, and largely to the patient as well.
So others are producing comparable kinds of units, correct?
Most of the units there are others that have come out with prototypes. The most of what's in service that I'm aware of right now in the US has been basically homemade. So physicians and engineers within the hospital setting, such as the Olson booth at Mass General, or the Sherry U booth at Brigham and Women's, was created by the doctors for the doctors and embraced by the doctors as a good, comfortable solution. In Canada here, there was a University of Waterloo engineering technologist that made a booth that he gave to the folks up at here on Perth. So there's a lot of homemade versions that have been sort of distributed or made. I mean, I think the most organized effort was the South Korean effort, and certainly some in Israel. But yeah, this is the first one that I think is ready to market at a very competitive price point. That's a production product as opposed to sort of customized.
Well, and I think we're going to have this issue even bigger as we not only ramp up testing of COVID-19, but of the antibodies. And, with this antibody test where they think there's a whole bunch of people out there in the community that have been infected, didn't either have severe symptoms or any symptoms. And we now have to find out whether they actually had the infection and now got the antibodies. And they're thinking it's going to be, 80%, 90% negative. So to find those people, we're going to have to test a bunch of people. Use disposable PPE all the time is going to be incredibly expensive.
Yeah, and those tests generally, the antibody tests, as I'm understanding it, are generally serology based. So they're it's a blood sample, but the same booth could be used for blood sample testing or the nasopharyngeal swab testing or throat swab. So there will be other tests that are a little bit more easy to manage. The swab that the Canadian physicians are using currently is very invasive and a little bit uncomfortable for the patient. And so there will be tests likely that come out that are a little bit less invasive and more comfortable. But all of the tests based on our discussions with different physicians that are using them are possible with the booth. So in that event, you're able to use the same booth in multiple circumstances. And you could also look at industry where a company like Toyota, who has thousands of people coming into work and they're doing testing on site, you can use this type of booth for testing for local populations. You could look at the meat plants. You could look at, whether you're doing a temperature scan and a series of questions, you can still put the provider inside a booth like this and provide them with a safe, comfortable environment. So from a comfort and control point of view, it's a good product, whether it's specifically COVID-19 testing or with a nasal swab, or doing temperature scanning. You could use the same type of booth in transport. So you get to the airport, you're scanned for temperature, you're asked a series of questions that indicate your worthiness for air travel. There are different applications that can be used. I think the more important one in the short term is the COVID-19 testing. But
I interviewed a guy that was manufacturing masks and mass producing, not masks, sorry, shields. And he was thinking that, his first market was going to be healthcare workers, but he was convinced that everyone's going to be wearing these shields, that grocery store ticket cashiers are going to be wearing these shields, that customs officers at the airport were going to be wearing these shields. Do you think that you're going to have these plexiglass units at every grocery store, at every customs official?
Yeah, we pitched over the grocery stores. The Longo's and T&T supermarkets are doing temperature screening for customers before they enter the store. So I think it really depends on the volume of traffic at any particular location. So anywhere where you have a high volume of traffic that needs to be screened in any way, I think that this is the type of thing that could provide that. I mean, the liquor stores have had security guards at their front doors spraying hand sanitizer on people, and I don't think they've done any screening per se, but they're certainly using masks and just it's a fixed booth station that gives you some ability to have some interaction with people that so yes, I could see this being used in multiple locations, but I think that the biggest impact from a cost savings and from a biomedical waste savings point of view is still for the frontline COVID-19 testing, but certainly not to say that, it's affordable enough that it can be used in dozens of other applications. But I think that the biggest bang for the buck of healthcare at this time is certainly COVID-19 testing, which we know that, we're expected in Ontario, for example, that we have a lab capacity of 20,000 tests, but yesterday we did under 6,000 tests. I think Tuesday was just over 9,000 tests, and Monday was somewhere in between. So we're still running at half capacity. Part of the problem is that long weekend, and there needs to be demand, but as people get back to work and there's more exposure, we're going to get back to a point where we need the testing and there will be a demand for the testing. And if we're prepared to do the testing, we'll either free up PPE for the elective surgeries or the industry that there's a huge shortage of material for.
We're chatting with Jim Ashton, the president at Imagine Fiberglass Products, Kitchener, that have developed a plexiglass booth for COVID-19 testing. Stay with us. So we're going to have some messages and come back with Jim with a little bit more on how the company actually thought through this idea and what it takes to not just sit still, but think about the future in COVID-19. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour, Saga 960. We're chatting tonight with Jim Ashton, the president of Imagine Fiberglass Products in Kitchener. They normally manufacture fiber reinforced plastic products, but now what they're doing is they are manufacturing a booth that is something that a healthcare worker would go in, put his hands through the booth into gloves and administer tests. Jim, I wonder if we could take a step back for a second. I've interviewed, and you're probably aware of lots of different companies like this, numerous companies in this era of COVID-19. Some of which are just sort of battening down the hatches and waiting things out, laying off their employees and hoping for the best that when things turn around in a month or two, they're going to be able to come back to work. And others are, like you, finding ways to produce products that are of use and make money. I've spoken to a couple of people that say, and they would have gone bankrupt or they would have had cash flow problems, or some of them have done it for their workers. They say, look, I could have survived, my company could have survived, but I would have had to lay off all my workers and I didn't want to do that. So I wanted to be able to keep my workforce employed. What was it that motivated you and what was the catalyst? Was it just seeing this video that you mentioned, or was it something else that got you thinking about the future of making money, making products for COVID-19 rather than just waiting till the market comes back.
Yeah, I think the main motivator for me really was seeing that the booth for testing makes a lot of sense, but the fact that when you dig into it and you find out what the process is supposed to be with the full change of PPE on a per test basis, it really became an environmental push for me, and it just struck me that it's such a wasteful operation that if we could take this product and ergonomically make it suitable to make a comfortable, safe place for a caregiver to do all this testing that's going to be required, that it seemed almost necessary, to be quite honest. I mean, it seems that it needs to be done because it should be done, as opposed to, yes, it's a moneymaker, but we were motivated mostly by the notion that we thought we could do it better and save a lot of money for the health system and divert a lot of.
Had you been involved in healthcare equipment before?
I have not. No. It again, more so, recognize what the others had done and recognize that with fiberglass, because it's essentially a liquid till it hardens, we can really make any shape that we want. So it's very durable, strong. And we were able to make a curved front booth that allows a provider to be more comfortable in the space than, if they're a little heavier, they've got a little bit room for their belly. We could, with a round front booth, we can just make it a little bit more comfortable. So we just felt that it was a good product to make, and we knew that it sort of fit with what we could do, and we could turn it around quickly.
Did you have the designers in-house, or did you have to go out of house to get design done?
No, the design started in my notebook on the 7th of April. Our in-house engineer did the CAD drawings. So by the following afternoon, we had the plug for the mold made. We had the first part out about 4 days later. So we had the booth that I showed you here, that's beside me, that was done within about 5 days of the initial concept drawing. So from the 7th of April till about the 12th, we developed the prototype. Then we started to refine with input from others. So we reached out to, as I mentioned before, Dr. Olson at Mass General, Dr. Yu at Brigham and Women's Hospital. There are some updates that are coming for the booth beside me, where we're having oval arm ports and whatnot, but we make everything in-house. We've just discussed with a company from Mount Forest, Ontario this afternoon about coming up with class 3 port sleeves for our gloves. So we've got fabric coming to do that in-house. So we can make the whole thing. We make the booth proper, the fiberglass portion from a mold that's now complete. We use CNC machining in-house for the polycarbonate panels to do the glove port holes and all the drilled holes for riveting the polycarbonate to the fiberglass.
And how much would, just a ballpark, how much does one booth cost?
Well, it started at about, we're improving the ergonomics a little bit, and so I haven't come up with a final cost, but I'm going to say it's under $2,500 Canadian. Again, sort of depending on how many are ordered and that type of thing. But if in the original configuration, under $1,800 Canadian. FOB Kitchener, not delivered to Vancouver Island, but quite affordable. So
no, that is surprisingly affordable. I was thinking you were going to be substantially more than that. Why is that? Is that because fiberglass is a good product?
I think it's, again, a motivation to see something that can conserve PPE and save the government money, doing our part. Not, we could have doubled the price and it probably would still be reasonable.
Yeah.
But it was more interesting to me to get something into the market that actually makes a real difference.
So it's very motivating to me to hear you talk about wanting to create a product that obviously has a healthcare use and is going to save money and save environmental trash. But you're also saving jobs, are you not? You're saving would you be operational and manufacturing goods if it wasn't for this?
We certainly brought people back quicker. I can't answer that. I mean, as yet, I wouldn't say we diverted resources to this project because we felt that it was important. But yeah, we brought people back earlier than we had perhaps anticipated to do the project.
And
Without more orders, I'm not saving jobs, but that's step two, really.
you said this.
So yeah, we potentially could create a number of jobs, good paying jobs, skilled labor jobs. If we see some traction, we'll obviously have a bigger impact from a labor point of view. But
if it takes off, no question. You said you saw this from a video. Did you see it personally? Did someone come to you with it? What was the germination?
well, another friend of mine who's in fiberglass had brought the idea to me. He was also saying, what could we do to keep people busy during COVID? And so he brought the video to my attention, and then he promptly bailed on the project. And then I got a little more passionate about it and decided that I'd devote a lot of time to it. So we've personally, I've devoted the past 6 weeks almost exclusively to this. And some of my people internally have devoted not near the amount of time, but certainly in the first week and a half, we devoted quite a bit of effort to.
Are the designers and engineers and manufacturers excited about this, or no? It's just another product.
Internally,
Yes.
yeah, no, everybody's excited about it, and the thing that we have our morning meeting, and it's we can't believe that there isn't a political will to see the cost savings and the diversion of the waste, in particular under the Trudeau government, of course, with their environmental policy. Their determination to reduce greenhouse gas. You would think that cost and waste diversion would be a top priority. So
no question, I think it would be. And
it's really been I mean, we're excited about it, and we keep innovating and coming up with new ways to do it based on the feedback that we're getting from the doctors that we've discussed it with. So yeah, we're still excited about it. We're mildly discouraged, but still optimistic.
Have you got some prototypes at work in some of the hospitals somewhere?
We've offered units to a number of hospitals, and so far the buy-in is low. And again, I think it's God bless these people. They're busy, and I think part of the difficulty is the difficulty in implementing something new. There's been a bigger challenge, I think, with lab capacity and the turnaround for testing. So I think that at least for the Ontario hospitals that we've talked to, I think that they're struggling with some other challenges. And again, I think this becomes it's difficult to get somebody to buy into something new when you're in the middle of a busy period of activity, right? So I think it really becomes a political will. If there aren't people in administrative roles that are looking at this saying, geez, this makes all the sense in the world, which is what we do every morning. We say, geez, this doesn't make any sense, but we can't get more traction. It makes all the sense in the world. But those people also need to have a little bit of time to take a look at it and determine that it's sufficiently interesting to propose a change, so.
Well, I'm sold, and I think that it's a great idea. You're obviously an entrepreneur, and you have an entrepreneurial bent. You've come up with a brand new idea that is new and different, and you're trying to sell it to healthcare professionals and to government. What do you think the secret is to having that entrepreneurial drive?
Mm-hmm. I don't know. For me, it's I really love what I do. I mean, it doesn't matter whether we're making it. We make different things. We make camper parts. We make theme park parts. We make fiberglass swimming pools. I enjoy that. I mean, I enjoy the engineering. For me, it's really an enjoyment thing. I don't know. It's certainly not always rewarding. There's always struggle. There's always challenge. I couldn't say only for myself that that for me it's just more of a I really enjoy it.
Well, Jim, it's a pleasure to meet you and to chat about both the product, which I think is a game changer, and I'll do what I can to promote it and to encourage both politicians and healthcare professionals that I come in contact with and that may watch or hear my show to consider it. But I also just encourage you to keep at it, because I think that number one, your entrepreneurial drive and coming up with a great idea that could save healthcare workers time and healthcare institutions and our government money, and actually deliver these tests in a more efficient, safe manner is the type of product and the type of thinking that we need. So congratulations and thank you very much for what you're doing.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So this has been a fascinating conversation with Jim Ashton, who is the president at Imagine Fiberglass Products based in Kitchener, who normally manufacture fiber reinforced products, but now what they're doing is a booth for COVID-19. We're going to take a break and come back, and I'm going to have some concluding comments. Thanks so much for joining us. Stay with us. Well, welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour, Saga 960. You know, I've had the privilege of interviewing a bunch of different companies over the course of the last 2 months during this COVID-19, and what they've done in regards to keeping people working, coming up with new ideas, making money, and most importantly, actually coming up with product ideas that are of assistance to the market, to healthcare workers, to the government, to people during this time of COVID-19. And it's fascinating to me that some companies just sort of, don't do anything, just wait things out. As sort of the old line is described, batten down the hatches and wait out the storm, hoping that in the end they can come out the other side and do well. And then other companies actually see the disaster, the pandemic, the emergency, the storm, as an opportunity to come up with new products and stay alive, and if anything, thrive. I spoke with George Irwin, the toypreneur, what did he call himself, who had a toy business that was devastated because of the closing down of toy retail stores, etc. And he got called from people in China and some of his suppliers that had previously done Halloween masks and other types of masks, and said, we can do masks for PPE for hospitals. And he switches over his sales, he switches over his warehouses, he switches over his whole logistics system to doing that. I spoke to an automotive supplier and a plastics company that we're going to go bankrupt and we're going to have to close down and we're going to have to lay off a bunch of people. And instead what they do is they start developing masks, and masks that are plastic that fit into a structure that holds them up, that really is taking an automotive company and a plastics injection company into the healthcare space. I spoke with a company that is a DNA testing company that was doing DNA testing for other things, that all of a sudden switched to doing DNA testing for COVID-19. And then today, this fiberglass manufacturing company from Kitchener that is doing these booths for healthcare workers. I have a friend that is a person that was creating sails for windsurfers that starts to sew masks. Fashion designers that are sewing masks. I could go on. And it's interesting because what it does is, each one of the times I've asked them, where does the idea come from? And more often than not, the idea comes from someone else. It's not something that is a brainchild that just pops into their head. Someone mentions it to somebody, someone makes a call, someone sees a video, someone sends a video. And so it's back to these ideas, that these connections that you make in life, these networks that you have. Count Classy on Friday in my interview with him said, your network is your net worth. And I kind of believe that completely. Ideas come from a whole bunch of different areas that are the connections that you have in life. And then getting going, each one of these people has talked about how they had to connect up with the Collingwood Hospital or the Harvard Hospital or the Brigham Young Hospital or this thing or that thing. And so therefore it's connections that you have where you get the ideas in, and then it's connections you have where you test the idea and you get resources and you get prototypes. And then getting the sales. Again, you got to get out, and whether it's procurement with the government or a prototype with a hospital, again, there's something about connections. And then the question about what drives these people. You heard from Jim, what drove him was this desire to contribute, and also to reduce waste. So an environmental attitude. What drove the manufacturer of the shields that I spoke to was this idea that his employees would be out of work and his company might be bankrupt. And so he did it to really save jobs. The DNA testing company, they did it because they were convinced that the current DNA testing with the swab was uncomfortable, wasn't scalable, wasn't going to be convenient for remote locations. And so therefore something that was handheld and quick to do would be far better for the healthcare workers and make more sense. So it's not altruistic, but there is this attitude about producing a product that is of use to society, producing a product that is of value, and reducing environmental footprint or something, keeping people employed. So it comes back to all these discussions that people have had, we've had in the years of people just don't want to make money. That they want to do is they want to do something good. If you make money at the same time, well, all the better. And frankly, you got to make money, otherwise you can't stay in business. And then it also excites people. People want to work for companies that have got a vision, a objective that is bigger than just the dollar sign. And how Jim talked about how people came to work, how he has dedicated almost 100% of his time for the last 6 weeks on this project. Others that I've talked to have had the same thing, where salespeople and producers have gotten excited. The plastics company that said that he hired his son who had just graduated from college, and the son hired a whole bunch of his friends. So it ended up being this thing that all the people wanted to get together and work on it at once, in sort of a congenial manner. There's something about this. There's something about wanting to get excited, even in a disaster, about doing good for society, helping produce a product, reducing waste, keeping people employed, making jobs, that is the key. We got to think about that. Anyway, just a couple of my ideas. Brian Crombie on the Brian Crombie Radio Hour, Saga 960. Thanks for joining. Good night.